I think that for learning a language, when you're an adult, you have to go through this difficult process of dealing a bit with your ego,
Yes.
because we don't like any adult. I know that's my case as well. We don't like making mistakes, and we don't like to be seen making mistakes or looking, stupid or less capable.
Welcome to You Belong in the C-Suite podcast. You are ambitious in life and in your career, but something is missing. You want to bring more of your passion to what you do. Because let's be honest, you pour a ton into your work, and it needs to mean more. I'm your host, Laura Eigel. I'm a mom, wife, PhD, coach, advocate, introvert, and indoor rowing fanatic. I'm passionate about living a life that's in line with my values. We'll give you the actionable tips and tools you need to lead with your values, make a difference, and have career success. The world needs more diversity and authenticity in the top jobs at organizations. Your leadership belongs there. You belong in the C-Suite. What gets you up in the morning? What drives your decisions? What do you stand for? No idea, not even sure where to start? I use my values to guide my life and career. It's the basis of how I've built boundaries for myself and stuck to them. Are you ready to dig into what matters to you? Go to thecatchgroup.com to download your free values worksheet. That's thecatchgroup.com to download your free values worksheet to get to your core values and take action on what matters most. Welcome to this week's episode of the You Belong in the C-Suite podcast. This week, I'm sharing my discussion with Angela Blanco. Angela is the founder of Fluency Lab, an online Spanish school designed for busy professionals who want to master Spanish for personal and professional growth. At Fluency Lab, Angela and her team have created a method that blends practical language use with engaging content for professionals. With a deep love for education, Angela is committed to reshaping the way we learn languages, ensuring everyone leverages their existing skills and strengths to achieve fluency efficiently. In our conversation, Angela and I talked about her career journey and her path to launching the Fluency Lab. We talked about why language education, specifically enhancing Spanish proficiency for adults and professionals, improves communication and career development. We talked about multiple career boosts that learning a language can give you in your career. And we talked about how learning a language is a brave act, one of curiosity, and how it can enhance your authenticity as a leader, showing up for your team and your customers. One of my favorite parts of our discussion is where we went deep on how learning a language can help you understand how you learn, which is beneficial for your self-awareness and acquiring other skills beyond a language. Be sure to stay tuned to the end where Angela gives us a tangible way to take action. Let's get started. Well, I want to welcome you to the You Belong in the C-Suite podcast. Angela, thank you so much for joining. I'm really excited to spend some time with you and to just get to know you better.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me on, Laura. I'm very excited about this podcast. I really like it.
We're really excited to jump into our topic, but before we get too excited about the topic, I want to learn more about you. I want to learn about your career history, just your story. Can you give us a little bit more insight in who you are in your journey?
Yeah, well, I'm from Colombia, from the capital city, from Bogota. I'm not living there anymore. I've been living in the UK for the last 3 years and a half. So it has been a new cycle, a new part of my life, what I've been going through. But yeah, well, I come from a family of educators. My parents, both of them are psychologists, so we always went talking about all these topics. And yeah, I fell in love with languages, and I decided that it was a great idea for me to make people get closer to other cultures, but also to other people, like other points of view, and to get different type of connections. And languages have been the best way to do that, like to really connect with someone. So after learning to speak English and after doing some other languages, I realized that I really enjoyed teaching my language. And well, coming from a family of professors and teachers and etc., it was just going to happen somehow. So yeah, that's what is being happening. And yeah, since I came here, it just became more obvious that that was the way, and that was kind of my goal to work on it. I really enjoy it. I'm so happy. I love my job, really.
Mm, I love it. I love it. How did you decide to then build the company? How did you know the timing was right? And what problem are you really trying to solve, especially for your target audience, which is basically kind of the same as the audience here, like working professionals, understanding like how to meet them where they are. Like how did you know that that was the right time? And how did you decide that this is the thing that needed to be done now?
Yeah, well, I didn't decide it. Like it wasn't 100% my decision. It just happened. Like events just took me through that path. I was working, I was doing my career at the university, and I had the opportunity to live for a year in Jamaica in the Caribbean. And it was awesome. I was learning, like, to get more comfortable with English. And also, I was helping the staff in the university to communicate with people who were doing scholarships from Latin America or from Spain. And they wanted to get through the documents and all of it. And I realized how much I love teaching the language, mine, and also how nice it was. I mean, it sounds funny, but how nice it is working with adults.
Mm,
Teaching adults for me, working and learning about their lives is for me so interesting, really. And they have a real intention. Their motivation for learning the language is very clear, so that really helps. It's like people believe that maybe it's the opposite, that kids learn better, but not necessarily. If someone has a real motivation, you can imagine that they really can get a lot of progress. So when I came back to my country, I started working with tourists, people who are
mm,
just, learning to communicate in Spanish, to make friends, to keep going through South America, like backpackers and all of it. And then, like some years later, I'm just jumping through the years very fastly. But then, well, this 2020 event happened,
mm,
and I had to move online, right? So
right.
everything changed. People had free time, and this thing of, well, I want to do something for my life or my career, etc. Why not learning to speak Spanish during this period? We didn't know how long it was going to be, so people just jump into it. And I realized that in many countries now it's not about tourism or about this communication about scholarships and so on. There's this real need of communicating in Spanish due to the changes of population.
Mm,
So I work with lawyers, with nurses, with doctors, with people in different levels of, managers, etc. And they just came back telling me, like, I was able to solve a problem for someone who couldn't speak in English, like freely, and I helped them to solve the problem. And I felt like I was able to do it without a translator, without a interpreter, without anyone. So I just thought, yeah, definitely that's something to work on. And because of their results and also because of the joy that comes from that, I just thought how to make it work, how to make professionals with their busy schedules, with their lives, with families, where everything, get the time that they would need to learn the language, but do it efficiently, so they don't lose the motivation, and they get the results, and they can help and assist their clients or their patients better. So that's that's how education has been evolving. And now, yeah, my audience is specifically adults, professionals, people with lots of help to provide, and they just want to be able to do it even better.
Yeah, I think you mentioned so many of the struggles that I think people have. And like, even for myself, like I have tried to learn Spanish several times over the years. and I've always like stopped and something else has gotten in the way. And so you mentioned before, like there's some very specific like outcomes or goals that people have as professionals. That could be solving problems, it could be working with different populations. Like what else are those motivations, and how do you see the folks that come to you, how do they stick with it? Is it once they start, like you provide the opportunity and the method to where they do stick with it? Or what's that? I guess I'm trying to figure out, how do you, even if you have the, like myself, like you have the aspiration, but you just haven't like done it, like, and figured it out. Like, how do you see that? And how do you overcome that struggle? And how do you help folks do that?
Yeah, I love that question because it really opens for me. Like right now, I'm thinking on different aspects. So the first one, your motivation, is unique. You maybe found yourself in in a situation where you couldn't help someone, and that's what you don't want to repeat again.
Yeah.
Some people, all sorts of stories. Maybe they have family, members who speak Spanish, and now they lost the language through generations, and they want to be able to reconnect with the roots. So that's very different. And what I say, backpacking, tourism. So those normally are the cores: the professional, family, and tourism.
Mm-hmm.
So in the professional field, what we normally work on is on using the grammar and all that stuff, but just very focused on how to start, using it in real life, like how
Okay.
solving problems, right? And so many times, and maybe that's the reason for many people who could say, well, I tried and I lost it, or I just lost my motivation, started doing other things, life happened, and something.
Mm-hmm.
It's because at the very beginning of the process, traditional methodologies, like what we have seen at school or what we see when we go to a language school, even if it's private, is to go through all the little aspects that probably are not going to help you, right? If you're a nurse, you don't really need to learn the animals, right? Whereas if you're a veterinarian, that's definitely one of the first things you should focus on. So yeah, those type of things that you start losing motivation because it seems like it takes too long to really
Mm-hmm.
see something that you can use, right? Like, okay, so now I'm able to understand my neighbor. Okay, because they're talking about this, or they're going to be talking about food, or talking about the city, or talking about. So that's one of the things that I do is understanding the person environment, like how they're going to be using it, and use the vocabulary, learn that, get the logic of the language through that vocabulary that they're going to be using at first, like that is really going to be important in their lives. So yeah, that's. And now of course comes to my mind the idea of autonomy. I really think that one of the advantages of working with adults, with grow-ups, is that you don't have to. You can give them more responsibility,
Yeah.
sort of. Right? You don't have to be with them in every step. It's just like, okay, so if you want to do this, how could you become an independent speaker, right? My final goal is that our students don't depend on us or a translator. So what we do is to develop that curiosity. It's like, okay, we're not going to give you everything. You have to learn
Mm-hmm.
to extract from content. We normally ask, like, what have you been consuming recently? Like what type of videos, what type of newsletters, podcasts, etc. have you been listening to? Do you have any questions about them? Yeah, I heard this word. So we try to, make Spanish get immersed in their lives, and also, create that self path. I don't know if that's the right word, but that own path. And it's like, okay, I don't need my tutor anymore because now I'm able to do it.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
yeah, it's being independent. That's what really makes them get to that level of confidence, being able to do it on their own at the end.
I really love that idea of the curiosity, and that you're teaching that within it, and you're not relying, like as a learner, I'm not going to feel like I am reliant on somebody else for me to do the thing.
Yeah,
It
exactly. And you might get used to your tutor voice
mm,
or your tutor pace of doing things, and that's not real life. So you need to really expose yourself to other things, and you are the only one who knows exactly what type of content you would like to consume, right? So yeah.
Yeah, that's right. So as we think about this at work, I'm obsessed with all things values and showing up authentically. My personal mission is to get more authenticity and diversity in the top jobs at organizations. And so I'd love to talk about how does learning a language help us with that? Like, I'd love to connect it a little even more broadly. I have my guesses, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, I would love to hear your guesses as well. So,
Yeah.
well, I could think that mentioning the authenticity is being your own. I mean, just thinking on the examples of interpreters, when you have
Mhm.
to, in healthcare, normally you have the opportunity to have an interpreter who's helping you. I've heard some experiences from professionals who are, you have your own personality, your own way to approach things, and maybe you speak just a little Spanish, let's say. And I have heard some stories when they say, I give them the diagnosis, to a person. And it's such a delicate thing to do, right? You don't want to do it too abruptly or maybe to don't explain it properly. And they said, and sometimes I feel like nothing, it depends, of course, on the interpreter, but they feel like maybe the interpreter is not doing
Mm.
expressing the things with the same care, with the same
Yeah.
uh you know being as delicate as they should, giving that diagnosis, and maybe that could lead to misunderstandings, and they feel that they cannot provide their service as good as they could because of that language barrier, right? So yeah, and the veterinarians as well were telling me, like, I suffer a lot when I'm not able to talk to the own to my client, to the owner of their pet, and tell them, well, this is what we're going to do, but it's going to be all right. Like giving that personal touch to your work, something that you will always want to have in your hands. Not having the language barrier could really like make it get lost on the way.
Yeah.
So that's something at least that jumps in my mind when you mention about these
Mhm.
things, how your values really connect with the aspect of learning the languages, because you could really keep being yourself, keep in control of
Yeah.
what makes your work you, without having that interrupting situation with the language, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I love that interpretation of that question, and it's like being able to continue to be the authentic leader, or your being your authentic professional self with lots of different kinds of audiences without the barrier of the language like separating, right? And even just like learning, being able to learn the language. You mentioned curiosity before, and I think I love when I know that I meet somebody that is multilingual. It tells me a lot about them, right? It tells me that they're curious, that they are a learner, that they can do lots of different things, not just speak a couple of languages. And in the US, we don't speak a lot of languages. We usually just speak English. And so it's a differentiator too here if you do. And that's always something, like we all have a little bit of, a little bit of Spanish. I didn't even take Spanish. I grew up in Texas where I should have taken Spanish
Yeah.
in school, but instead I took French because
Oh,
I thought
right.
that was going to be
It sound
interesting.
nicer, yeah.
Yeah, it sounds fancy, right? But when was I ever going to use that, right? So if I could go back, I would make a different decision, but still have not done it. But it says a lot about the kind of person and leader that you are. I think it feels like you're potentially open to different things, to learning, usually learning different cultures, and then also, just to your point, being able to connect with lots of different people in different ways that you can't if you only know English.
Yeah, there are so many aspects. What you say about the curiosity, and yeah, maybe this open-minded
Yeah.
approach. Like,
Yeah.
okay, let's see what this culture or world, you will realize when you speak different languages that even reality sounds very, magical and stuff, but it's real. Like the way we shape reality is different in every language, right? So there are some things I always put example. English have this expression of thinking out of the box, and I love it. We don't have it in Spanish, right? We
Mm,
have other things that even my students have mentioned, like I prefer the way you draw it. You Spanish
mm,
speaker draw this concept. I like how the English speaker shape that concept of thinking outside of the box. It's like, yeah, we're really like in this square thing, and we're trying to look at panoramically, from
mhm.
above. I love it. So that those things start happening when you learn more languages. You start shaping your reality differently because you have more sources to do it. So that's something, and well, the fact of being brave. I think that for learning a language, when you're an adult, you have to go through this difficult process of dealing a bit with your ego,
Yes.
because we don't like any adult. I know that's my case as well. We don't like making mistakes, and we don't like to be seen making mistakes or looking, stupid or less capable, right?
Yes.
And and seeing these, professionals who have, so many titles and great positions and have done their whole career that used to be admired, because of their expertise, and feeling that they have to, go back to square one somehow in terms of expressing themselves, talking about their life, their routine, for example, let's say in another language. It needs a lot of courage, to feel like, okay, I'm just going to do it. Some people don't go through that, don't continue because of that confrontation of, I feel like I cannot do it. That's one of the main reasons kids are very good at learning, because they don't care. They really don't
Yeah.
care. It's
Yeah.
not only about the brain development. It's a lot depending on, I don't know, the kid just, a little a toddler when he's learning to speak a language, you just tell him or tell her, oh, darling, you have to say this and that. They just start saying it, right? But an adult feels like, oh, why I was so stupid, I forgot that. Of course. So yeah, I think that's another thing that says a lot about the person. When they learn another language, I admire the courage. I've been there, and I admire the courage of, being ready to be a bit to make mistakes and look a bit less respectable somehow. I don't know. I mean, according to our ego.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up. I think, especially if you try it and you don't pick it up very quickly. I don't know that anybody picks it up that quickly, but like just the idea that like you're gonna make mistakes. So yes, you are brave for doing all of this stuff, but I imagine that a lot of people get discouraged. My award-winning book, Values First: How Knowing Your Core Beliefs Can Get You the Life and Career You Want, is now available in audiobook. Since the book released just last year, the biggest question that I've gotten from readers is it available in audiobook? In this book, you'll get to hear my most pivotal career stories and some of the successes of my clients as you learn about the Values First framework and how you can take action on your life and career. The audiobook is narrated by me, so if you love this podcast, you'll love the audiobook. Values First: How Knowing Your Core Beliefs Can Get You the Life and Career You Want is now available on Audible and iTunes. I've tried, there's so many things out there now. All the little app and technology things that like, oh,
Yeah.
learn a language, try this or try that, whatever, right? And then you don't do it. But sometimes it's because of that. It's this idea like, well, if I fail at it, because I can't get it right, because I keep making mistakes, maybe nobody will see if I like practice it on the side, right? But just the consistency of being okay not getting it right. It is so true. It's the ego. You're so right.
Overcoming that is what really gets you to the result. So
Yeah.
yeah, with those language apps is great. I mean, nothing against them. It's just that it gives you a lot of information, and maybe it could happen to you or anyone. I have heard this story many times. It's like I've been learning Spanish with X app, and I understand a lot,
Mm,
but I get frozen when I need to speak, right? Because
Yeah.
there's a huge difference between, yes, I understand, and what could I produce? Because that producing is the one that could make me feel insecure, right? So I just
Yeah.
get shut at that part. Like you need both. You need, of course, the input, the things that you're understanding, and also the production, the output, what you do with the language. So yeah, that's one of them. And yeah, and if your motivation maybe is not clear enough, like you just say, well, let's try German, let's try French, let's try Spanish. But just because of trying is that moment of confrontation when you really say like, and you create the excuse, maybe I'm not good at languages. I don't have the talent. I should have learned when I was 3 years old. Or, you will create a new excuse. Kids are sponges and I'm so, left behind. It's too late. And it's just because your ego is protecting you from that fear of failure, right? Because you think, no, it's not me. I mean, it's not that I'm scared. It's just that I don't have the talent. So it's
Mm-hmm.
just a shame when that happens. But yeah, it's just those things that you find on the way. And that's why I find this process of learning, I mean, it happens with different disciplines, but in my case with languages, I find it so interesting, and I like to see the progress on people when they go through all those barriers, and then just what I say told me like I was able to help someone, and I feel so good now that I'm able to, be myself in Spanish as well. So
Uh,
that's great.
I love that. Be myself in Spanish as well.
It's a process.
It is, but that is so
It is a
powerful.
process. It,
It's so,
it doesn't happen that fast. Yeah.
no, but it's very interesting that even just that mindset, that's like really hitting me right now. Be myself in another language as well. That's really interesting in terms of even just a motivation. Yeah. And that back to that authenticity that we talked about
Absolutely.
earlier. Yeah. So as you teach professionals, adult learners who have busy lives, like what does that really look like? How much time does it take? What can they expect kind of in their learning journey in learning a new language with Fluency Lab?
Well, we set, it's a realistic goals. It's like if, for example, you just have this window during your day or your week to study, we get the most from it, but we have to understand that that's going to make the process a bit more extensive, and it's fine. Many people say, okay, as long as I can, try and evolve every week a bit, it's all right, even if it's going to take me, maybe years, right? So it's understanding that, because that's another stuff where we're used to fast results. We want fast results. And I think that one of the most common search terms in YouTube in terms of languages is how I learned put the language in, 2 months, in a week, YouTubers
Right.
compete about who learns faster. And the fact that YouTubers do that tells you a lot about how we tend to approach learning, right? And I
Mhm.
know how to learn piano in a week, things like that, right?
Right.
So yeah, you have to be realistic and say, okay, if I only have this amount of time to spend getting immersed in the language, talking to my tutor, reading, we make the plan, right? If you're not going to meet your tutor every day, because of course it's difficult, at least try to connect with the language and do something, to keep the bridge between lessons going. So that's what we do. That's why I talk about autonomy. Like we try to help the person to get involved in the language on their own, with their own interests and things. And yeah, and we try to make it as efficient as possible, working on the vocabulary and expressions and, grammar maybe that they're going to need first, according to logic as well, evolving from one structure to the other, but working on the structure they're going to be using first, solving problems and making questions, or maybe, for communicating with clients or with staff that maybe is from Spanish speaking countries. So yeah, that's pretty much it. We try to adapt to their time, and having people from different parts of the world makes it great. So our tutors know that in the morning maybe it's more Australia, like Japan students, the ones who are going to be connected maybe after they finish their work day, and then we have people from Europe, and at night we have people from the USA and Canada. So it just works Perfect. We just adapt to the availability of the person.
I love it. Yeah, I love the idea that autonomy is a core tenet in what you do. To your point, like if you can't be reliant on a tutor, like when you really need it, right? And so being able to be flexible, but also have accountability, I think is just a really important thing. So as we think about, obviously there's we talked about a lot of benefits of language for yourself. As you think about holistically in terms of career, how has learning a language helped you in your career, another language help you in your career? And then how do we extend that to others? Like what other career boosts or benefits do you think that you get by learning another language?
Of course, my experience, if I think about exactly my case, our case as Spanish speakers who learn English is completely different to English speakers who learn Spanish. It's like different opportunities
Mm-hmm.
open, right? For me, in my case, I could say that maybe the access to information was the big change. Most of the content on the internet and research papers, are made in English. So for me, that was great. But if a person wants to learn to speak Spanish, what is going to open is more the worldview. Of course, in terms of work, is going to help them to provide a better personal connection with clients who feel more comfortable speaking in their mother tongue.
Yeah.
But I think is what I can see in our students is the perspective on life. I mean, maybe it's difficult to really frame it and say exactly what I mean with it, but I can see that our students, if you talk to someone who speaks more than one language, not necessarily Spanish, any, you will find that that person has a different approach to life just because they have been able to talk with someone who has, you know, another universe going on in their brain, because the configuration of the language just shapes a bit of the way you think. So yeah, holistically, I would mention that. And as an adult, I think that the fact of learning something, going through all this process helps you to learn a lot about yourself. So you know better what you are good at or the best ways for you to learn. Sometimes we just work on autopilot and don't understand exactly how we are consuming and processing information. And we have been discovering, we have some tests and quizzes about learning styles for our students.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that you're just going to work with, I don't know if you're a visual learner, you're only going to work with visual content. We try to keep it, of course, logically with different channels, listening and all of it. But it tells you a lot about how you learn, and sometimes your career tells you. I mean, that's a theory that I cannot hold, but people with different careers have different learning styles, and we have been
Mm-hmm.
able to get to those aspects and help them to acquire the information faster, because after all, you need to retain information. That's part of learning a language. You have to retain information. I don't like to say memorize because we have a negative perception of the word, but you have to retain information to be able to use it. So learning or understanding how you do that, I
Yeah.
think helps you not only for languages, it helps you for any other thing. If you need to prepare for a test, for a promotion, now you know that maybe it's better to record it, or maybe it's better to look many videos, or maybe it's better just to see it in this specific environment when you feel that you are focused on it. So yeah, that's the side effects of learning the languages, that you learn a lot about the way you learn.
Yes, I love that as a side effect. That is so important. I literally just did a podcast. It was a solo podcast on why it's important to understand how you like to learn. So I love that you just said all of those things. I think it is so true. And I wonder even too, like, do you find that some people thought they learned one way, but when learning a language, they might even learn a different way? And understanding that could be really interesting to you as well.
And because sometimes you have this perception of learning stick to your experience at school
Mm-hmm.
or during the university. And it doesn't necessarily mean that 10, 20, 30 years later, you're still going to be processing information in the same way, right? Maybe what worked back then is not going to work anymore. But a professor told you that you were very visual, that you was very good, memorizing things on this way. So you just come with that idea. Like, I know that I'm a visual learner. I know that I'm more kinesthetic. I don't know. And maybe they then prove themselves that there's more ways. It's different techniques. And we try always to provide, the possibility to experiment with different ways to get closer to the language, to immerse in it, and yeah, they discover that there are many different channels they can use to learn information, to consume information, even in their own language or in their career. Yeah.
Yeah, and that is definitely a wonderful boost for career, to understand how you acquire new information, whether it is a new language, a different skill, like all of those things, learning about how you learn. It's very meta, right? But it's very, like, it's an important skill in corporate America, especially with the way that work is changing and technology changes so fast. So I love that as an kind of extra benefit of that. I think that's an important call out. Yeah.
Yeah, it saves you. I mean, if you want to think about time, it saves you time. It makes it more efficient, and also makes you feel more confident that you can do it, right? You don't get overwhelmed. Like, oh my God. No, because you're used to learn. You're normally retaining information because speaking another language, I mean, you never finish the process. So, I mean, even in my language, Spanish, there are so many things I still don't know, but new words and new concepts and new jargon and things. So yeah, it makes you feel more confident. Like, yeah, I can do it. I can do it. I have done it before.
Awesome. I love it. Well, I love that side effect. I think that's awesome. So how do we connect, and what is the best action for our listeners to take to learn more about Fluency Lab and what you all do?
We got our website, which is fluencylab.co, just that. And there you can find, different opinions of our students, normally how we work, all the information about it. I have created sort of first step between getting to know about Fluency Lab and taking the lessons or getting into a program, like process of jumping into private tuition, and it's a magazine. So this year I have created a physical way to represent our methodology. So how we work with different channels, the visual learning, the kinesthetic learning, etc., through the magazine. So I wanted to make this a special invitation for your listeners, and I get a little discount for getting the magazine with the audios. Of course, being a podcast, I thought about the audios, like maybe they're going to get used to listen. They may be good listeners, so they're going to be able to get the copy of the magazine delivered to their house. We wanted to make it more tangible, so definitely that was the goal, and the audios online. So
Wonderful.
yeah, the link for that I gave it to you. It's just fluencylab.co/you belong. Like, so
Awesome.
it is going to be for your listeners. So it's going to get a
Wonderful.
better price for getting it.
Awesome. We'll also put that link in the show notes so that there's easy access. I have just loved our conversation, and I just want to thank you so much for sharing your thought leadership and all of your amazing just connection. It's really beyond, to your point, it's really beyond just learning another language. It's bravery. It's learning how you learn. It's like all of it's being yourself in another language. I love all of that so much, and I just want to thank you for your time today.
Well, thank you. Thank you for your invitation. And yeah, well, I hope that many people take that first step and get into learning, not only Spanish, any language or anything they're postponing.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I want to thank you so much for listening to the You Belong in the C-Suite podcast. If you are enjoying this content, please remember to rate and review on Apple Podcasts. By leaving a review, you are helping others find this content. We will be featuring 5-star reviews on air in upcoming episodes. Editing and support for the podcast is done by S&E Podcast Management. To get more tips and tools to help you live a life guided by your values, go to thecatchgroup.com. Keep your boundaries and take care.